some lesser, well, not lesser known, but lesser useful features, or less commonly used features, or features that you will possibly not use in the first few occasions, are the following. For example, import and export. Now, we have already talked about recipes, and we have seen recipes in action during setup. And I also mentioned that recipes and export files are kind of the same things, and they are XML files containing content and configuration on an Orchard website, of an Orchard website. Now, let's look into that. Again, we will go to the admin and enable the import-export feature. Oops. I misclicked something. Yes. Okay, the import-export is now enabled. When do you want to use import and export? Well, first of all, when do you want to move content and configuration between Orchard websites? For example, if you want to take a kind of a snapshot of a website and recreate it somewhere else, like when you have a good blog recipe where you have all the widgets and the menu and everything configured, and now you want to create a blog for your friend as well, you can export your blog and import it on another website. Recipes are also quite useful during development when you are working in a team, or even without a team, because you can create a recipe that has the common configuration of a development environment. For example, you are creating a module and you have some basic configuration that you need all the time. You can put it into a recipe and export it when you need. If you are in a team, you can share it with your buddies, and they can also import it on their local machine. It would kind of seem that it's also a feature for making backups. It, to an extent, can be used for that as well, but really the best backup or the best way to create backups is just backing up the whole database of Orchard and the media storage, because there is one feature missing. Media files, so not the media content items, but the file themselves, are not imported or exported, so you have to handle them separately. So let's create some export and do some import, and let's see what happens. I now open the import-export menu item here, and as you can see, well, we have an option for importing and an option for exporting. So let's do an export first. But before that, I will go back to the content definition of students, because there is something missing from students. Well, students are missing a lot of things, but one thing that the student content type here misses is an identity. What am I talking about? If you are exporting and importing content, it's very useful if you can identify a specific content item, because here in this local system you have database IDs like 1, 2, 3. That's cool, but if you are moving content items between different websites, then you don't have those IDs as the common identifiers, because each of these websites have their own IDs. So if I export a blog post here and import it on another website, how can we make sure that both apps know that that's that blog post? And for example, if I have already imported it before, it will be overwritten, because it will recognize that, hey, I already have this blog post, just the content changed. And this is where so-called identities come into play. You don't have to know much about identities at this point, just that if you want to export and import a content type, you need to have either author out part on it or identity part. That's it. On most of the built-in content types, you already have author-out part, so you can decide. For students, I will use the other one, identity part. So I'm now adding a part called identity. And this identity part will create a globally unique identifier in the background for the content items. Yeah, it's done. So now that our students can be imported and exported, let's export them. I'm now under the export again, and you can recipes can be quite complex. They can execute various steps. They can not just change configuration and content, but also execute dynamic steps. So there are a lot of things to recipes as well. But in their default form, they can carry content and content definition. So let's export those. And let's go to the student content type and export both the content items and the content definition. So if you missed it, the columns are here, content and content definition. So I tick both in the line of students. And we will only export the published versions. So let's do the export, and we get a nice export.xml file. Well, I will export it to our demo folder. And let's open the file. As you can see, the file is an XML file. It has some structure, but whatever. There are content definitions, which is kind of important here. So under this content definition section, we have, well, the content types defined. This is useful because here I created a student content type. But if I would go to my friend's Orchid website, he doesn't have the student content type. So I couldn't actually import student content items because there is no corresponding content type. So what we can do is that I can also export the content definition, the content type, and import it there, so everything will magically just reappear there. And we also have the student content items under the content section or tag. As you can see, students not have an ID, because although I attached the identifier part, the IDs weren't generated because you have to resave the content items for them. So I will go back and quickly save all the students. Luckily we just have 3. This is not working unfortunately, but I will create a new student just so we can see that it works. So that will be what kind of J? That will be Johnny Doe. We don't have that yet. And he majors in particle physics. Let's hit publish now. We will only need one content item for the sake of this test anyway. And I will save this export file again. And we can see that Johnny Doe exported here now has an identifier. So let's make a test. I will remove all the other students here. And just for Johnny Doe, I will go here and change the title part to Johnny Doe Jr., for example. And remember that we have the identifier specified here. So if I now import this, we await that the existing content item will be overwritten because the identifier will match and the import-export feature will know that this is the same content item. So let's try that. I'm going back to import export, but now under the import tab, and browse to the previously exported file, hit import. It will run for a few seconds. Now it's done. Let's go back to Johnny Doe, and when I hit refresh, it's indeed Johnny Doe Jr. So, long story short, you can use the export, import features to move data and configuration, and even more between multiple orchard instances, which is quite cool during development, but also when you want to push some data out to production.